Hey there, and welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming Podcast. It is great to have you join us. This podcast series features those who have gained victory over a life encounter. With that life experience, we encourage those who are experiencing something that might seem to be insurmountable. We advance and encourage others by passing forward evaluated life experiences. We have three objectives in this podcast series. We want to encourage those who are engaged in any type of life encounter by offering to walk with you to help you gain victory over anything that might seem impossible. We want to share our experience to help you. Our second objective is to help you develop a confident resolve that there are multiple options to get past any life obstacle. It's a matter of thinking into the situation. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are facing a dilemma resulting from a previous decision you wish you could reverse, we want to help you think into all of the facts and factors involved in making an informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business manager, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture Company who is sponsoring this podcast series. Today, we feature Erin Clements for a sixth episode, where she talks about life boundaries. Life boundaries in this context can be considered rules, standards, those things that comprise our values. And when a person has exceeded those boundaries, we need to address the consequences of exceeding those boundaries. Sometimes we challenge ourselves. Sometimes we doubt ourselves whether we have the ability, the desire, the know-how, the confidence to confront a person when they have exceeded the boundaries. But it's my perception, Marty, that if we don't confront people who have exceeded the boundaries, we're accepting that behavior. Marty, what are your takeaways from Erin and any thoughts you have about boundaries?
First of all, I want to say Erin did a great job talking about boundaries. Boundaries are a part of your life, no matter who you're dealing with. I guess I always thought, well, boundaries are just between a husband and a wife. The way Erin talked about boundaries today, it includes every aspect of your life. Your relationships with other people, decisions that you've got to make, and being strong in setting the boundaries and not giving in to fear of rejection, fear of being criticized, a lot of emotions in boundaries when you need to be strong with another person. Boundaries with yourself, your health boundaries, all of it. This is a great podcast to listen to if you're not a person that likes to confront or fear of boundaries, setting boundaries.
Very well said, Marty. We all need to define boundaries and how we're going to handle staying within those boundaries. Let's listen and learn together. Erin, thank you so much for joining us again. For our listeners, this is the sixth episode for Erin. If you're listening for the first time, I want to encourage you to go back to the beginning where Erin chronicles and discusses a very difficult part of her life. She felt she needed to divorce her husband because of sexual infidelity. And it was a life-devastating experience, as Erin has explained to us. But after having recovered, I'm going to use that term, from a very devastating portion of her life, Erin, you're now looking forward and actually using this as an opportunity to learn from past life experience and possibly start a ministry to others who are experiencing something very similar to what you experienced. Erin, thank you so much for sharing with our listeners.
Thanks for having me again, you two. Appreciate it.
Erin, you have mentioned boundaries, and this has come up in just very lightly in a few other topics, but can you go just a little bit further into maybe defining what boundaries are, what you felt you did not have, and maybe what you've learned through this experience, how to apply boundaries?
Sure. I guess the place that I will start is where I didn't have healthy boundaries in my relationship, and I think I had shared previously, the first time I met with the counselor, she asked me what boundaries I had set up or what boundaries I had in my marriage, and I looked at her going, what are you talking about? What is boundary? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so we had a lot of work ahead of us. I had a lot of work ahead of me. I think I had to ask myself, so why didn't I have healthy boundaries in my relationships? And that could include my spouse, it could include my kids, it could include my extended family, work, whatever. Those are all areas that we can and probably should have boundaries. But one of the areas that kind of stuck out is just this fact of not feeling worthy, not having a good self-worth, not having support or being supported in that. And I always find this interesting. I never thought I was a people pleaser. I found out I'm a real big people pleaser. And so that honestly was a big hiccup for me in really not establishing boundaries, because it was more about pleasing people. It would be pleasing my parents, would be, wanting to be loved, wanting to be liked. And there's a real danger in that of power. And when I was doing that and people pleasing and not having appropriate and healthy boundaries, I was actually giving power to people that probably one didn't deserve it. There's not a balance there that there should be when you do that. And also by not having good boundaries, I actually participated in enabling my ex-husband in his bad behavior and being able to get away with it for as long as he did. In doing so, I found that I was, helped him cover up stuff. He was lying and he was manipulating. And I guess I was playing into that. It's not good because none of that stuff honors God. My covering it up, my not having boundaries, his behavior, there isn't anything in that honors God. So that's really a place where I did try to set a few boundaries, even throughout in our marriage, and they didn't work. And they didn't work not because of him, they didn't work because of me, because I was the one who was not following through with consequences. Or if I did, I would follow through to a point and then I would be like, he keeps trying to, power through all this stuff. And I would just honestly just give up after a period of time. He'd kind of wait me out. And then he'd know, because it was a pattern in our marriage, that I'd eventually come around and everything would go back to the way it was, which was unhealthy.
Is there a part of what you're describing? You mentioned low self-confidence, maybe low self-worth. You did mention that. Do you feel that in the past you were vulnerable to being manipulated, that the feeling of not being worthy, not having confidence, he was able to talk you into believing that and what he was doing is right? Is that a part of the boundaries as you were discussing that?
I think that there definitely was, and it's come up before in our previous conversations, that I was younger. I didn't really have a good sense of what I valued. And when you don't have a good sense of what you value, you tend not to be able to make really good, healthy boundaries for yourself. Because of that, yes, I would say that contributed to his being able to manipulate me more easily, and to just kind of get away with some stuff and to push stuff to the side and to say, kind of dismiss it, I guess would be the best way to put that.
In the context of being manipulated, having confidence and so forth, you've mentioned throughout our podcast journey, has it taken you quite a while to develop what I'm going to call healthy self-confidence?
Yes, it has. And, it's acknowledging, one, that I didn't have it. And then it's working through with the help of counselors and coaches to go, this is what this looks like. Because if that's all that I've seen, or that's all somebody else has seen in their life or experienced in their life, they're not going to have a real good view of, or good idea of what anything is healthy relationships and what that's supposed to look like. What does it look like when you have respect for each other? What does it look like when there is health versus, say, disease or disease that way in a relationship?
When you felt like talking to him about boundaries, did you know right away that it would cause a conflict? There could be an argument. I'm not doing this, or, you're not setting boundaries on me and like that. And so you just give up.
Absolutely. It's hard, Marty, because I guess I had this idea in my head of what a mom and a wife are. And it looked 24/7. That's how it looked like from my mom's perspective. And she was my model. She was a wonderful model, but there was that kind of 24/7 access they had to me and that I allowed, right? I allowed that access to me. But there was, again, there were times when those boundaries that I would put up, or just, boundaries that I would put up would just get bulldozed. Like, these do, and I think what it ends up being is, well, these do not apply to me. They may apply to everybody else, but they do not apply to me. And I can interrupt, and I can do this, and I can do that. When you do try to establish those boundaries, and you do say, follow through with the consequence, a lot of times what you can experience is kickback and is rebellion. I was reading about, I think it can happen a lot within families and marriages. I was just kind of doing some review, getting ready for this podcast. And there was an example, finances can be a huge area where boundaries are needed, but there's also manipulation. Whether it's, say, an example was used of a father who was generous with his wealth, with his kids, and his kids got used to it. And then the kids start putting boundaries in, like, well, because he was paying for things, then he thought he had more say in their lives and what they should and shouldn't be doing and where they should and shouldn't be. And there was much more control. And the kids are kind of like, they're adults with their own families now. So the kids are putting boundaries up. So what happens is that parent, because the boundary has been placed, didn't like it. So what does he do? He starts to punish. He punishes the kids, the adult children. And so it's a pattern, whether it's finances, even time, however it can transfer to any area in our relationships, whatever those look like. But absolutely.
You're a godly lady, and I have reason to believe you're very familiar with the scripture that talks about husband and wife being submissive to each other. And there are roles, godly roles in our house. I'm building up to the question, Erin, did you feel your godly wife role to be submissive was to, in hindsight, almost be a doormat kind of thing that just cannot question anything of what he's doing?
Yeah, it's certainly what I allowed. Unfortunately, it is what I allowed. I don't know if I can say, because I don't necessarily know his motive and his mindset in those moments, but if that was his intention, but I would say over time, I definitely believe it happened often enough that it became definitely a pattern of, and I would say that's definitely was an obstacle for me, again, being a Christian wife and being submissive. And again, I wasn't perfect. I bucked back and I did what I could in periodic places, and probably not appropriately. And, we had our bouts of arguing and things like that went around and around. But that's definitely something that can play into it. But another thing I want to bring up too is just that with regard to God, we go to the scriptures, we go to the Bible, and God really shows us what that looks like, right? He boundaries have been in place since the beginning of creation. He had boundaries when he separated the air and the solid, and then the waters, still there's boundaries. There's only, the waters can only go so far. The Garden of Eden, he set a boundary with Adam and Eve of, the only thing they weren't supposed to do was to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Everything else, there was so much freedom in that, but just that one thing, there was a boundary there. So God is good to show us that there are healthy boundaries, and those healthy boundaries really, when they're honoring God, and they do honor God, they do nothing except give us more freedom, one, in our relationship with him and in our relationships with one another.
No, that's very well said. You mentioned finances. This can become very customized to husband and wife, but together there is, Marty and I believe, you have to set boundaries. We're spending more than we're making. And the end result of that is very predictable. But yet, is there an aspect, Erin, where you felt that you had totally different finances from him, that you were not authorized to know what he's spending? I'm not trying to put any words that are not there, but in the context of boundaries, can you define what you now believe to be healthy boundaries in terms of husband and wife and finances?
So where we started out was we kept actually our finances separate until for about 7 years into our marriage. I had my account, he had his account, because I worked for probably the first 4 to 5 years of our marriage. So we had those separate, but we both put into the pool, right? We put into, we split it, and we were in agreement of how we split it. And then after we moved away from where we initially lived, we then kind of pulled everything together. And I will say that is when, if I can look back, that is probably the start of where things got muddy. There weren't really boundaries, in my opinion, of how we did talk about money. We were together because, again, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I wasn't bringing in any income at the time. And if I did get a little part-time job here or there, it's kind of like, oh, you do that, I'd pay for my hair, I'd be, do things like that. But I also, there was a point where I did most of the bill paying. So I kind of knew where everything was going. And then he took over the bill paying. So I'm going back and I'm looking and going, I wonder if that's when things really started taking over. I can't say for sure because it never got this far in our divorce. If there were, I can guess there were probably other credit cards I didn't know about, just because of certain things that have happened in the past. But it was there again, there didn't seem to be any boundaries. There got to be no boundaries. There were boundaries, and then there weren't boundaries. And I think each couple honestly has to do what works for them, because we can say, oh, this needs to happen this way, and this is, whatever. But I think as long as you come together and you're transparent with everything, that's really huge, is that transparency, especially if you're married. There's no, until you're actually living in the same place and sharing the same home. But there just didn't seem to be many boundaries in the way of finances either, honestly, that I can really say, except that I know that I like to keep things in different buckets. So here's for taxes, here's for savings, here's for checking, here's for this, that, and the other thing. And he's like, hey, it's all coming from the same place, it's all going, blah, blah, blah. And it would really confuse me. I'm not a numbers person. I can do the basics. I can get the general, principles and things like that and work from there. I would say it got really muddy. And even when I would look at accounts, I'm like, that doesn't look right. But I never pursued it any further. I really didn't, because I was trusting, right? That's one of my things I trusted. So I think about that periodically.
Finances is one of the topics we have discussed previously. We know finances can be one of the leading stressors in a marriage, leading to at least difficulty, if not divorce. But I think we can probably agree, Erin, and I think we did in a couple of podcasts ago, at least notionally agree, we need to have a meeting of the minds of finances as we are dating each other, get to know each other, because if we don't discuss it now, it almost surely is going to come up sometime later. It's one of the things we just need to understand each other, who is strong in numbers, who's not, and do we agree that we will not overspend, and do we agree, and to whatever degree. I don't want to try to imply that I'm mandating anything in a relationship, but yet Marty and I have enough experience and experiences with other marriages that finances is one of those problem areas, or let's say one of those factors that we need to have an understanding with that. And Erin, you were very eloquent also in saying that if we don't establish boundaries, we could enable various behaviors. That's a nuance. I'm going to use that term that I think need to be very discerning about each other, that what might, if we allow whatever to happen, can enable some poor behaviors. You seem to have experienced that. Can you go into any more detail about boundaries? And if you don't have them, they could result in enabling bad behavior?
Well, I think one of the places where I would start is that we don't, and I've had a number of counselors that I've seen, we can't control other people, right? So those boundaries that we set in place are really for us, because we choose how we respond to the behaviors of the other people in our lives. And so again, I really, by not having any boundaries, was enabling that bad behavior. But there can be, behaviors like lying, infidelity, intimidation. There's those types of behaviors too. I'm speaking specifically to, say, maybe the addiction, the sex addiction that I'm familiar with. I think, yeah, by not addressing things, we can definitely enable them. But the other part I've really found is that the enabling comes when we don't follow through on the consequences. And that is such a hard thing for me because I like peace. I don't like confrontation. And that does not lend itself to doing that and establishing those consequences. I could do it with my children. I was really good about it with my kids, but with my spouse, I didn't do well with that. One of the things you've probably heard of the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry and Dr. Townsend, which is just such a good book. And I highly recommend it. Actually, I've got it in my little library and I was perusing through it this last week and I'm going to be rereading it just because there were so many good nuggets in there. But one of the things too, they said is maintaining your boundaries is good for other people. So it's good for other people. And this was huge for me. It said, it will help them learn what their families of origin did not teach them, to respect other people. And that's where we can go back to family of origin, which is a whole nother deal. But looking at where we came from, looking at where they came from, and maybe understanding a little bit better what that looks like. I would say for me, the enabling came when I didn't follow through with consequences. And when I didn't, because again, being a people pleaser, it just lent itself to it.
Would you consider yourself to be a people pleaser? I want to encourage you to take the time to take an introspective look. Think about some of the things you do. Think about the reasons for doing those things you do. And think into whether you do what you do if you did what you did because you are, quite honestly, trying to please someone else. When we act in that manner, frequently it is because we have a lower self-image than what God would want us to have. That is, we may have an unhealthy self-image such that we may think we're not worthy, we may think we don't have a lot of value, and what we will do to compensate is try to do something to please others. Scripture clearly asks us to consider, is it more important to please God or to please man? God made us in their image, meaning in the image of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and in that manner, He made us with a very specific purpose. Scripture goes further to say He knit us in our womb. I want to encourage you to take the time to think about what motivates you to think and say what you do. What you just said is very, very important. There are perhaps too many of us who do not like to confront, and I think it is a matter of establishing rules and then enforcing those rules. And it's just like in any position, parent, leadership in a company, whatever I accept, that becomes the new lower standard. And if I don't have the courage to confront someone who is not living up to the desired standard, that person has reason to believe that, nope, it's acceptable. And then children, employees, anybody else can have the feeling you're holding me to a standard, but not that person. Yeah. And I do understand the consternation that may be an applicable term. And when I need to confront somebody, particularly if I don't have a lot of confidence, I got to gather confidence. I've got to go to the Lord for wisdom. How do I do this? Because boy, this is really uncomfortable for me. Erin, I'm sensing you may not have totally recovered from that yet, but you're on a journey to recovery. Do you feel and it's all, I guess I'm asking this in context of a healthy self-confidence. Do you feel more confident now that you can confront somebody in a loving way than you had in the not too distant past?
Yes, I do. And it comes down to when speaking the truth in love. If you are coming from a loving place, they may not receive it that way, but as long as you know that you're coming from a loving place in speaking that to them and sharing with them, here's where this is a behavior that I'm putting a boundary around. This is where it's not being, if it's not respected, this is what's going to happen. This is going to be my response to it if it doesn't happen. Again, it's not trying to punish them for that.
Did you go through some, I'll use the term mock conversations of confronting someone? Did you have to practice this with a counselor, a therapist to help gain your confidence to do that?
I am doing that right now. Actually, that's going to be my next session with my counselor. We talked about, because I share with her situations and scenarios that I'm in. I am a person who often doesn't have words for those situations. I always admire people. Oh, that was a great response. I wish I could respond that way, but that's not my person. And so it does help me when I can work with someone who then gives me words. I'll put a scenario together for them. And then they say, well, what would you say? And so this is what we're getting ready to do. And so we're going to start talking through some different responses, because I think once we start those responses and those boundaries, then it becomes easier. We become more comfortable. And I did remember what flew back was the confrontation, because it is such a big thing for me. It came down to fear. I was fearful. I was fearful, one, of losing relationships. That was we love our people. We love our families. We love them. And to think of not having somebody in my life because of their bad behavior or their whatever was really hard. And I thought, I'm not comfortable with that. And because I have had personal experience on both sides of my mom's family, my dad's family, where there was a period of time where we were all cut off from each other because of things that went on. Both on my mom's side, they took a step back. And then same thing on my dad's side. We had to take a step back. Dad's side was about 10 years. Mom's side was about 8 years. So that's a long time to be without those relationships. And I always thought, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to work. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to figure it out. For me, confrontation isn't always necessarily healthy. It wasn't modeled necessarily in a healthy way. They were just like, you lost relationship when you confronted somebody. So I'm having to work through that too. But not to be fearful, because guess what? If that happens, it happens. It's not my decision. It's not my choice. It may be the other person's choice. Fear is not from God. Fear is not from God. And that is what I continue to tell myself when I get in those spaces, to go, okay, what is the fear? What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? And then you can go from there.
Thank you for being that expressive. Many of us feel to some degree we need a relationship that if this relationship were to break off or dissolve itself, I don't know that I could establish another relationship. I don't want someone to talk bad about me. Some of us are people pleasers. It's almost to the extent I'll do whatever it takes to garner your approval. Marty and I have had conversations like this almost ad nauseum. If a person does not share our values, if they don't share something similar with us, maybe they're not the one that's going to be in our inner circle. I'm not saying you can't be a friend. It's just that, we may have 2 or 3 people who qualify to be in the inner circle, fully trustworthy and so forth. But the person who may be lesser of one who shares our values, maybe they're a little bit further down the list. We have less frequent contact with them, but it doesn't mean we're not a friend. And I don't know that I'm expressing things the way you would, Erin, but I know there's some people that feel that if I don't have this person as a friend, I don't know that I can gain any friends. And it is an aspect of having a low self-confidence. That is my perspective.
Yeah, and I think the gaining friends, that just speaks to everything that we've been talking about. And the gaining friends, for me, it's like gaining another spouse. Is that in God's will or not? Is that what God wants for me? Am I capable? I mean, is that possible given everything that I've been through and what I'm working through? But it goes, you said approval, and that's, to me, that's hitting the nail on the head. It's that people pleasing. It's needing approval from other people. It's not wanting to disappoint other people. That was always as a kid and as an adult, I didn't want to disappoint people. And yet when I knew I did, you're so hard on yourself. I also agree with you both on being your circle small. with people who have similar values. And like you said, it's that access. I had talked earlier about God. God, Adam and Eve had full access to God right in the garden. They had full access to him. Then when they made the decision to eat from the tree that they've been asked not to, there was a consequence. And there was also less access to God. With each choice that we make, each sinful choice that we make, there becomes less access to God. Thankfully, Jesus said yes to God, what God had asked of him. And we do have that ability to be in relationship with God and do that. But again, I think when we go down certain roads and have certain sinful behaviors and patterns in our life, we don't have access to God like we could, right? We don't have the access to God like we could. But the same is true for people in our lives. As we trust, as we build trust, they get more access to us. And to me, there's nothing wrong with having a group of, certain friends in our lives that don't have as much access because we haven't established that relationship. Or if we have, we know. And maybe it's just going to be like that. But I always think too, I still want to be a blessing in their life. I still hope that Jesus will use me to draw them to him through me or through somebody else. But I at least want to be that vessel that he can use in their lives. And I was, with my kids, I would always say, I want you to be the good influence. I want you to be the positive influence in your friend's life. I don't want them to be the bad influence in your life. I want you to be the positive influence in theirs. So that kind of supports what you've been saying as well, Ron.
As you reflect on your past life and the need for other people's acceptance, can you maybe trace that back to maybe some friends, something that maybe caused you to feel that way? Because there are a lot of people who feel I need to do whatever I need to do for you to accept me.
So I do. I just actually was working on this again with the counselor, and there for me was always a fear of failure. And so that fear of failure, I want to be really clear on this. I adore my parents. They're wonderful people. They were good mom and dad, and there's no blame on them. It's just the way that our life was, and it's who they came from. And my grandparents being from the Depression era, failure really was not an option in my home. It was not an option. And so I can trace that back to my family of origin. I'm accepted when I do well. I'm accepted when I perform, when I get the grades I'm supposed to, when I achieve what I'm supposed to. And so that really did stem from, if something did go wrong, because I feel like I was the one actually who did a really good job at failing. My brother, not so much. He was like, I'm like, what the heck? He's like straight A's and all that stuff. I'm like, I'm struggling through to get like B's. But when I would get a C, and my mom would be like, that is not acceptable, Erin. You do not get C's. I remember it was like in 4th grade for spelling. I'm like, I'm just not a good speller. And she's like, you will be a good speller. I'm like, okay. There was that. And so I believe that my fear of failure really transferred into a need of acceptance and what that looked like in my life.
That is extremely important, Erin. There's so many of our listeners who, when they think back, and I want to make certain our listeners understand, we're not here to blame anybody, but as we think back, we want to be, I've used the term chain breakers. We're not going to carry forward that which had maybe a negative impact on us. We're assessing, not judging, assessing different things in our life. Words matter, actions matter. And what I perceived is not necessarily what someone else will perceive, but just understand I did so someone else might, those kinds of things. Erin, oh my goodness. Every time we speak with you, new topics come to mind, and the fear of failure is a topic that so many of us are dealing with. It can happen at a very early childhood, something said, done. It just is implanted in what I consider the subconscious, and various triggers can dominate that thought. And we determine, I'm not sure I'm worthy because I might fail and so forth. Erin, I'm going to add a new topic as a potential. So Can we discuss that just a little bit further?
Yeah.
Words matter, actions matter, and some people will, in silence, carry forward something that resembles a hurt, and it manifests itself later in life, and we may not even be able to identify what that is at the time, but maybe being reflective, we can look back and think, maybe that is something, and we're, in my estimation, doing a very healthy assessment of our life and passing forward what we've learned. And I believe, Erin, that's exactly what you're doing with your life. Marty and I just so much applaud what you're doing, and you're going to have a great ministry. Can we possibly, and I know I'm going public with asking you this, have an episode where we talk about failings, feelings of insecurity, things that have been said and done in the past?
Absolutely. I would love that.
Erin, on behalf of our listeners, thank you so much for being very honest, vulnerable, and we're learning from your life, and you are on a journey as the rest of us are. And thank you for the opportunity to experience your journey.
Thanks, Ron and Marty. I appreciate it.
Boundaries is a wide, encompassing topic that in this context involves primarily the standards of behavior for which you expect. It begins with you. It takes an introspective look to know who you are, what standards do you expect, and it includes certainly your confidence to live those standards, but then expect those standards of others who are in your sphere of influence. It is a matter of confidence. Erin was very candid in acknowledging she did not have a lot of confidence. In an earlier life, she also felt she did not measure up in some cases, that she fell short. All of this combined to have her feel she was uncertain who she was, what her worth, value is. That carried into the marriage, and having a low self-confidence, low self-image manifested itself in the context of boundaries, not feeling comfortable confronting those who did not measure up to the standards of her expectations. It went into the marriage. She felt she did okay with her children, but as far as her former husband, she felt she was not capable of confronting him in a way that required an amount of courage, self-confidence, and she felt, I believe we're going to learn more about this, the possibility that she was a failure and may continue being a failure, which then led to the uncertainty and insecurity of whether she would be able to effectively confront her former husband. And for that matter, she felt she needed to please other people, and that in part has to do with a lower self-confidence. When we feel we need to do what is necessary to gain the approval of other people, that frequently means we feel less confident of being who we are, our persona. With a lower self-confidence, lower self-image, we can be reticent, we can be shy in working with others and being appropriately assertive. I'm not addressing being in your face, but I believe it is appropriate at times to be assertive, even if you are a lean back, if you are a shy, if you are more of an introverted type person. There is an opportunity for you to just express who you are and feel confident of knowing who you are and having expectations. You're not looking down on anyone who doesn't meet the expectations, but you will feel confident in making a choice of who to include in your circle of friends. These are all topics that are very broad, encompassing, and require a very introspective look of ourselves and what it is we are capable of doing, who we are. Quite honestly, I think it does matter of defining who we are so we can project ourselves the way God created us to be. This is a topic of further discussion, and it's one that is very meaningful to anyone who is uncertain of their boundaries. We all, I believe, need boundaries. We need to know who we are, what standards we expect, whether you are a leader in a company, whether you are a parent, whether you are a child, no matter what role you are functioning. It is incumbent on us to all know our boundaries and respond to those values we define. You may need some help in overcoming anything of the past that is keeping you from performing at your peak performance. Marty and I are certified life coaches through the John Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. We'd like to help you through anything that may be holding you back from performing at your peak performance. Contact us. Let's schedule a 30-minute complimentary coaching session. Through that, we can help you determine if we are the right ones to help you to live your maximum performance. Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating with this podcast series. We hope you also want to share, comment in the comments section. The more we share with each other to share our thoughts, the greater the opportunity we'll have to pass forward our life evaluated experiences. We hope you'll want to share this podcast with your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn connections, your Twitter and Instagram community. The more we share, the greater the opportunity we'll have to advance others and be a very positive influence in other people's lives. We look forward to working with you.